Thank you for tuning in to hear this tale. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you as part of our community. And hey, drop the name of the city you're listening from in the comments below. It's awesome to see how far these stories reach. Now let's dive in. My first night as a police officer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, began like any other rookie's shift, except it turned out to be the night that flipped my entire world upside down. I can still picture myself in the precinct locker room, fussing with my gear, tugging at my crisp new uniform. I just graduated from the academy, and I was hell-bent on making a solid impression. That night, I'd be riding with Officer Jack Ramsey, a grizzled vet with over 2 decades on the force. The air outside felt thick, heavier than it should have for a mild spring evening, as we climbed into the patrol car and hit the streets. Jack was all business from the jump, running me through the essentials, radio lingo, hotspots for trouble, the usual suspects to keep an eye on. But something was off. I couldn't shake it. The city seemed restless. Ambulances and fire trucks screamed past us more often than seemed normal, their sirens bouncing off the brick facades of downtown. "Dispatch is buzzing tonight," I said, trying to play it cool despite the knot forming in my gut. Jack glanced over, his face half lit by the glow of the dashboard. "Yeah, probably that flu bug the news won't shut up about. Lots of folks calling in sick, or worse." His tone was steady, unfazed. 20 years of dealing with chaos had made him a rock. I envied that calm, but it didn't ease the unease creeping up my spine. The radio hissed to life, cutting through our small talk. "All available units, respond to 392 Oak Avenue. Domestic disturbance. Multiple callers reporting yelling, possible assault in progress." Jack snatched the mic before the dispatcher even finished. "Unit 522, en route." He flipped on the lights and siren, and my pulse kicked into overdrive. My first real call. We rolled up to Oak Avenue, and the neighborhood was eerily still. No kids riding bikes, no old-timers on porches soaking in the warm night. Just rows of dark houses, blinds shut tight. The place we were headed was a squat, 2-story home, every window blazing with light. But it wasn't welcoming. The front door hung open like a gaping wound, and a jagged hole gaped in an upstairs window. Worst of all, streaks of dark red smeared the doorframe, glistening wet under our headlights. "Eyes up, rookie," Jack said, unholstering his sidearm. "This ain't right." We stepped out, the crunch of our boots on gravel sounding too loud in the silence. A sharp cry, a woman's voice, split the air, followed by a heavy thud from inside. Jack took the lead, his flashlight slicing through the dimness as we crossed the threshold. The living room was a war zone. Couches flipped, a coffee table splintered, family pictures strewn across the hardwood, their glass frames shattered into jagged teeth. The air reeked of copper and something fouler, something sour that twisted my stomach. "Lancaster PD, anyone here?" Jack's voice boomed. No answer, just a faint scuffling from upstairs, like rats in the walls. We swept the ground floor, room by room. Blood spatters marked the walls, a broken lamp dangled by its cord, but no bodies. Then, from the kitchen, came a sound that stopped me cold, a wet, choking rasp, like someone drowning in their own throat. I swung my flashlight around and nearly dropped it. A guy sprawled face down on the tile, surrounded by a slick pool of crimson. But he wasn't still. His limbs twitched, jerky and wrong, like a puppet with half its strings cut. "Sir, can you hear me?" "We're here to help," I said, stepping closer despite the primal urge to bolt. Jack's hand clamped onto my arm. "Hold up." His voice was a low growl. The man's head jerked up at my words, and I froze. His face, God, his face, was a nightmare. Skin gray as ash, mottled with dark patches, eyes milky white with tiny red dots where pupils should have been. His jaw dropped open, showing teeth blackened with gore, and he lunged. Jack yanked me back and fired. 2 shots, dead center. The guy stumbled but didn't stop. A third round caught him square in the forehead, and he crumpled like a sack of bricks. My ears rang from the gunshots, but before I could process it, the house erupted. Footsteps pounded overhead, wild shrieks tearing through the air, sounds no human throat should make. "Car, now!" Jack barked, but it was too late. Shadows loomed at the top of the stairs, lurching, broken shapes with glowing red eyes locked on us. More shuffled in from the hall behind. We were boxed in. "Kitchen exit." Jack roared, dragging me by the collar. I caught flashes as we ran. A woman in a shredded bathrobe, her throat a gaping mess. A kid, maybe 16, half his face gone. They moved too fast, claws outstretched. We hit the kitchen, and Jack shoved the door shut behind us. "No lock. Help me move this," he yelled, already heaving against the fridge. I threw my weight into it, and we wedged it against the door just as something slammed into the other side. The wood groaned under the assault. "What the hell are those things?" I gasped, my voice shaking. Jack didn't answer, just reloaded his pistol as glass shattered behind us. An old man in blood-drenched pajamas clawed through the window, shards sticking out of his arms. Jack fired 3 times. 2 to the chest did nothing, but the headshot dropped him. "Aim for the skull," he said, cold as ice. "Only way they go down." The radio on his shoulder crackled, frantic. "All units, multiple reports of attacks citywide. Officers down. EMS overwhelmed. SWAT requested at Memorial Hospital." Outside, I glimpsed flames licking up from downtown, the sky turning an ugly orange. The door behind the fridge started to splinter. They were breaking through. "We run for the car," Jack said, checking his ammo. "Stay tight. Don't stop." I nodded, gripping my Glock until my knuckles ached. The back door led to a tiny deck, then a long stretch of lawn to the street. It felt like a football field. Jack counted down, 3, 2, 1, and we bolted. The night air hit me, thick with smoke and that sickly rot. Shapes moved in the shadows, more of them, spilling from nearby houses, drawn by the noise. Halfway to the car, 3 figures staggered out from behind a pickup, hospital scrubs soaked in blood, one missing an arm. Jack dropped one with a clean shot. I froze, my hands trembling as I emptied half my clip before nailing the second in the head. The third tackled Jack, teeth sinking into his arm. He yelled, and I snapped out of it, lined up the shot, 1 bullet through its skull. It flopped off him lifeless. "I'm bit," Jack said as I hauled him up, his voice flat. "You know what that means." "No, Will." I started, but he cut me off. More were coming, shambling out of the darkness, red eyes glinting. We stumbled to the cruiser, piling in as hands pounded the windows. Jack floored it, bodies crunching under the tires as we peeled out. Oak Avenue faded behind us, but the city was unraveling. Cars sat abandoned, doors open. People screamed, fleeing down sidewalks. Fires bloomed like flowers in the night. Jack coughed, a wet, ugly sound, and I saw the sweat beading on his graying skin. "Dispatch, Unit 522, he rasped into the radio. "We've got a problem." "Unit 522, we're swamped," came the reply, panic bleeding through the static. "Mass casualties across Lancaster County. CDC says it's an unknown pathogen. National Guard's mobilizing. Head to evac zones at..." Jack killed the radio. "Listen up," he said, his breath ragged. "Bites spread it. I'm done. You need to cuff me." "What?" "No, do it," he snapped, slamming the car into park. "I've got minutes before I'm one of them. Secure me, take my ammo, and get to the station." I fumbled with the cuffs, my hands slick with sweat. He turned, wrists behind his back, and I clicked them shut. His skin burned under my fingers. "One more thing," he said, voice low. "When I turn, don't hesitate. Put me down." I wanted to argue, but the chaos was closing in. Sirens, screams, gunfire. My first night on the job had become a living nightmare, and it was only getting started. I sat in the passenger seat of the patrol car, staring at Jack Ramsey, my training officer, as the cuffs bit into his wrists behind his back. His skin was slick with sweat, his breathing shallow and uneven. The city outside was tearing itself apart. Sirens wailing, smoke choking the air, and screams cutting through the night like knives. My first shift as a cop in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, had gone from routine to a horror show in hours, and Jack's bite was the ticking clock counting down to something worse. "Get out," he rasped, his voice thick with pain. "Now?" A wet cough splattered red across the steering wheel, and in the rearview mirror, I saw his eyes, hazy, with crimson creeping into the whites. I grabbed his spare magazines, the shotgun from the rack, and my own gear, stumbling out into the street. A woman sprinted past, shrieking, chased by a lurching figure that moved like a broken machine. I raised my Glock, but they vanished into an alley before I could aim. A violent bang rocked the car. Jack was thrashing, slamming his shoulder against the door. His face, God, it wasn't his anymore. Skin tightened over his skull, jaw gnashing silently, eyes now glowing red in the dark. I couldn't look. I turned and ran. The city was a war zone. Flames painted the eastern sky, casting an orange haze over shattered streets. Car alarms blared in a relentless chorus, punctuated by gunfire, single pops, then bursts of automatic fire. The National Guard was here, somewhere, but the sounds of combat told me they weren't winning. I darted from shadow to shadow, academy training kicking in through the panic, check corners, scan rooftops, keep moving. Up ahead, a city bus had plowed into a corner store, its hazard lights flashing like a dying pulse. Wet, ripping sounds drifted from inside, mingled with a sickening crunch. I veered wide, while rising in my throat. The radio on my hip crackled. "All units, be advised, Memorial Hospital is compromised." Medical teams, static swallowed the rest. Then a new voice broke through, shrill and desperate. "They're in the dispatch hub. The doors, they're breaking." Oh God, silence. 2 blocks later, I stumbled on survivors. 4 of them, holed up in a little coffee shop called Brewhaven. They'd shoved tables against the windows, clutching makeshift weapons, a tire iron, a kitchen knife. An older guy with a golf club spotted me through the glass. "Officer." "Thank Christ." He started dragging a table aside. "Stay put," I shouted, waving him back. "Barricade everything. No noise. Don't open that door unless you're damn sure they're clean." He blinked, confused. "But the evac zone's probably gone." I cut in, the truth bitter on my tongue. "Hold tight till help comes, if it comes." A scream tore through the night, close, and the group shrank back. "Good luck," I said, and kept moving. The next stretch was a blur of nightmares. An officer I'd trained with, Daniels, I think, crouched over a kid's body, tearing into it with his teeth. A sedan sat stalled, windows smeared with bloody prints from the inside, passengers trapped. A woman clutched a toddler, both still as statues, pale under a streetlight. I retched twice, the stench of death and smoke overwhelming. Downtown loomed closer, the gunfire growing louder, sharp cracks of rifles, the deep thud of grenades. A military chopper roared overhead, its spotlight slashing across the streets. Then it veered hard, door gun blazing, the roar deafening as it unloaded into something below. I couldn't see what, and I didn't want to. 3 blocks from the station, engines growled behind me. A trio of SWAT vans screeched past, tearing toward the heaviest fighting. The last one skidded to a stop when they saw me. "Get in," a guy in tactical gear yelled, arm outstretched from the rear doors. I stepped forward, then froze. A flood of shadows poured from a parking deck across the street, dozens of those things, maybe hundreds, surging toward the noise. "Behind you," I screamed. The SWAT team opened up, rifles spitting fire, cutting down the front line. But there were too many. They swarmed the van like locusts, dragging the guy who'd called to me out onto the pavement. His yells turned to gurgles as teeth ripped into him. I bolted, their screams chasing me down the block. Cowardice burned in my chest, but stopping meant dying. I ducked into an alley, pressing against a brick wall, lungs heaving. The infected flooded the street I just left, drawn to the gunfire. When the shouting stopped, the quiet was worse, broken only by distant explosions. My radio was dead now, the chopper gone. Lancaster was crumbling, and I was running out of options. Ammo check. 2 mags for the Glock, 6 shotgun shells. Not enough if I got pinned down. The station was 2 blocks away, but the streets were a death trap. Then it hit me, the maintenance tunnels. We drilled their layout in training, a backup route linking key buildings, including the precinct. If I could find an access point, I might make it. I spotted a manhole behind a tipped-over dumpster, its lid ajar. I pried it open, wincing at the scrape of metal, and dropped into the dark. The tunnel swallowed me, my flashlight carving a thin path through the gloom. The air was damp, heavy with the stink of mold and something sweeter, rottener. Water dripped, each plank echoing like a drumbeat. Then I heard it clinking, rhythmic, behind me. Handcuffs. That shuffling, uneven gait. Jack, or what used to be Jack, had gotten free and tracked me down. I glimpsed him in the ladder's faint light as he descended, red eyes locked on me, one wrist still cuffed, the other a mangled stump. More shapes followed, spilling down from above. The streets infected had found the tunnel. I ran, splashing through shallow puddles, the tunnel splitting ahead, right to the courthouse, center to the hospital, left to the station. I veered left, the sounds of pursuit fading, then swelling again as echoes played tricks. Bloody smears streaked the walls. Someone else had tried this path and failed. The tunnel sloped up, narrowing until I had to duck under dripping pipes. Rats scurried past, a frantic tide fleeing something worse. A voice gurgled ahead, wet and broken. "Rook." My blood turned to ice. It was Jack, distorted beyond human, but I knew it. I turned, flashlight trembling. He stood 20 feet back, uniform soaked black, skin sagging like wet paper. His eyes were solid red, his mouth a jagged slash of teeth. "Help me," he croaked. "I'm sorry, Jack," I whispered, raising the shotgun. He lunged, faster than anything that broke and should move. The blast lit the tunnel, buckshot tearing into his chest. He staggered, but kept coming. 2 more shots, one missed, the last caught his head. He dropped, sliding to a stop at my boots, still and silent. The echoes hadn't faded when more splashing erupted behind me, dozens of feet, closing fast. The gunfire had called them. I sprinted, chest burning, the tunnel curving and climbing. Light flickered ahead, fluorescent, spilling from above. The station's basement access. I hit the ladder, climbing as hands swiped at my legs. I kicked free, reached the hatch, and shoved. It groaned open, and I hauled myself into a sterile hallway. Below, nails screeched on metal as the infected clawed up. I slammed the hatch shut, crushing fingers in the frame, and spun the lock tight. Their howls faded as I slumped against the wall, soaked and shaking. The adrenaline ebbed, and that's when I heard it, gunfire upstairs, shouts. The station was under siege. My night wasn't over yet. I hauled myself out of the maintenance tunnel and into the basement of the Lancaster PD station, slamming the hatch shut on the clawing hands below. The lock clicked into place, muffling the shrieks of the infected as they battered the metal. My legs gave out, and I slumped against the wall, gulping air that didn't taste like decay. My uniform was soaked, sweat, tunnel water, blood, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright after the dark, casting stark shadows across the hallway. Framed photos lined the walls, Jack Ramsey demonstrating a chokehold, me grinning at graduation. I forced my eyes away. Gunfire erupted upstairs, sharp and relentless, followed by barked orders. "Fall back. Hold the line." I recognized Captain Lisa Torres' voice, taut with strain. The station wasn't safe. It was a battlefield. I checked my gear. 3 shells left in the shotgun. 2 mags for the Glock. Not much, but it'd have to do. I dragged myself up, boots squeaking on the tile, and headed for the stairs. The first floor was a mess. Desks flipped into makeshift barricades, papers scattered like confetti, brass casings glinting under flickering emergency lights. The air stank of gunpowder and that rotting sweetness I couldn't escape. I called out, voice hoarse, "Officer Adams, Jack Ramsey's unit, coming in." No way was I getting mistaken for one of those things. "Adams, move your ass," Torres yelled from down the hall. I sprinted across the squad room, ducking behind a toppled cabinet where about a dozen cops had dug in. They'd wedged steel shelves across the corridor, firing through gaps into the darkness beyond. Torres grabbed my arm and pulled me into cover. Her tactical vest was smeared with blood, her face grim under the sweat. She clutched an AR-15, barrel still smoking. "Jack?" she asked, I searching mine. "Gone," I said, the word heavy. "Turned. I had to." She cut me off with a nod. "No time for mourning." "What's the sit rep?" I asked, steadying my breathing. "Bad," she said, popping off 2 rounds down the hall. "Hospital went down first, then the firehouse. Dispatch is toast. National Guards retreating to form a quarantine line. We're holding here, protecting civvies in the lockup." She jerked her head toward the reinforced evidence vault, a panic room in a pinch. "Smart move." "How many?" I asked. 25, she said. "Folks who ran here when it hit, some families, ours included." Her voice hitched, just for a second. I knew her wife and kid lived a few blocks away. No time to ask if they'd made it. A rookie, Jenkins, maybe shouted from his post, "They're coming again." I peeked over the barricade. Shapes shambled out of the shadows, cops in shredded uniforms, civilians in pajamas, a paramedic with his jacket half torn off. All with those glowing red eyes, moving like they didn't feel the bullets tearing into them. We opened fire, the noise hammering my skull. I aimed tight, remembering Jack's last words. Headshots only. Each shot dropped 1, but more piled over the bodies, relentless. "Low on ammo," someone yelled. "Same here," another echoed. Torres grimaced. "We've got minutes before we're dry." Then she stopped as the radio room hissed to life. A clipped military voice broke through. "Napalm authorized for Sector 4. All units, clear the area now. Repeat, clear Sector 4. Torres snatched her handheld. "This is Captain Torres, Lancaster PD. We've got civilians here. Request immediate evac." Static crackled. Then, "Roger, Lancaster. 1 bird available. Can you reach the roof?" Torres hesitated. The stairwell to the roof ran straight through that infested corridor. "Affirmative," she lied, turning to us. "1 shot. People. Full push. Clear that hall. Get the civvies topside." I glanced at the others, exhausted, bloodied, but steely. The vault held kids, elderly, wounded. They'd never make it without us. This was why we'd signed up, even if we'd never pictured this. "On 3, Torres said, racking her rifle. 1, 2. The lights died. Emergency backups flickered out, plunging us into black. Muzzle flashes and red eyes lit the void. Chaos swallowed us. We charged, firing blind, reloading by touch. I emptied the shotgun, switched to my Glock. The infected surged, their stench choking me. Someone screamed, teeth found flesh. I felt claws graze my back, spun, and fired point blank into a face I swore I'd seen booking perps at the desk. Somehow, we broke through. Torres rallied us, cops front and rear, civilians in the middle. We hit the stairs, the chopper's thrum growing louder overhead. Shouts and sobs mixed with the clatter of feet on metal. The roof door was chained. Officer Vega blasted the lock with his last shell. We burst into the smoky dawn, rotors kicking up grit. The helicopter, a National Guard Black Hawk, hovered low, side door open. Torres waved the civilians forward, parents clutching kids, an old man limping. The infected howled below, clawing up the stairs. "Last group, go." Torres yelled over the noise. "Adams, with them." "What about you?" I shouted. She grinned, dark and final, pulling a frag grenade from her vest. "Someone's gotta close the door. Get those people out, that's an order, rookie." I opened my mouth to argue, but the civvies needed me. I climbed aboard as the first infected hit the roof, tattered uniforms, snarling faces. Torres yanked the pin. The blast shook the chopper as we lifted off, the roof erupting in fire and shrapnel. She'd taken them with her, buying us seconds. We rose over Lancaster, a city in flames, tanks rolling at the edges, headlights streaming out as survivors fled. The sun crept up, staining the smoke red. My first night was over, but the cost was carved into me. Jack, Torres, the world I'd known. The radio buzzed with chatter, other cities hit, the outbreak spreading. This wasn't just Lancaster. It was everywhere. The helicopter lurched into the sky, the blast from Captain Torres' grenade still ringing in my ears. The roof of the Lancaster PD station vanished in a fireball, swallowing her and the infected clawing after us. I gripped the edge of the Black Hawk's open door, wind whipping my face as we climbed above a city I barely recognized. My first night as a cop, hours ago, just a nervous rookie in a stiff uniform, had ended with everything I knew reduced to smoke and ruin. Inside the chopper, civilians huddled together, 25 souls we dragged out of hell. A mother clutched her kid, both streaked with soot, eyes wide and glassy. An old woman muttered prayers under her breath, clutching a rosary. I scanned their faces, searching for Torres' family, her wife, her little girl, but I couldn't tell. Maybe they were here. Maybe they weren't. I didn't have the guts to ask. The pilot's voice crackled through my headset, clipped and mechanical. Lancaster PD, this is Guard Evac 09er. We're outbound to Rally Point Charlie, 10 miles west. Sit tight. Below, the city unrolled like a war zone. Flames chewed through downtown, swallowing storefronts and apartment blocks. Cars clogged the streets, abandoned mid-flight, doors flung open, headlights stabbing into the haze. Dark shapes darted between them, too many to count, drawn to the chaos like moths to a torch. I leaned out, squinting through the smoke. Military Humvees rumbled along the city's edge, forming a jagged line, tanks and troop carriers, their barrels swiveling. Beyond them, a river of taillights snaked into the countryside, refugees fleeing into the dawn. The sun breached the horizon, weak and red, painting the clouds like blood spilled across a dirty canvas. It should have felt like hope. It didn't. The radio buzzed, a frantic patchwork of voices bleeding through static. Phillies reporting attacks, hospitals overrun, National Guard in Harrisburg pulling back. CDC's got nothing, pathogen unknown, spread rate off the charts. I yanked the headset off, letting it dangle. It wasn't just Lancaster. This thing, whatever it was, had claws in the world beyond, and they were sinking deeper every minute. A kid next to me, a boy, maybe 10, tugged my sleeve. You're a cop, right? You'll stop them. His voice was small, trembling. I looked into his wide eyes, saw the trust there, and felt my throat tighten. Yeah, I lied, forcing a nod. We'll figure it out. He settled back against his mom, and I turned away, staring at my hands, still caked with Jack's blood, tunnel grime, gunpowder. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a fraud. The chopper banked west, cutting over suburbs that hadn't burned yet. Houses sat dark, lawns empty, like the whole town had held its breath and run. Then I saw it, a school bus, flipped on its side near a playground. Shapes swarmed it, tearing at the windows. Kids' backpacks littered the grass, bright colors against the gray. I gripped my Glock tighter, but we were too high, too fast. Nothing I could do but watch. Jack's face flashed in my mind, gray, twisted, those red eyes boring into me down in the tunnel. When I turned, "Don't hesitate," he'd said. I hadn't. 3 shotgun shells, and he was gone. Then Torres, standing on that roof, grenade in hand, giving us the seconds we needed. They'd both known what this job meant, protecting people, even when the world broke apart. I'd signed up for that too, but I hadn't understood it until now. Not really. A jolt snapped me back. The chopper shuddered, climbing higher. Taking fire, the co-pilot shouted. I craned my neck and saw them, figures on a rooftop below, not soldiers, not infected, but looters maybe, popping off rounds with hunting rifles. Bullets pinged off the hull, harmless at this range, but it was a reminder, the living could be as dangerous as the dead. The rally point came into view, a field off a rural highway, ringed with razor wire and floodlights. Guard troops swarmed below, unloading crates, barking orders. 2 other choppers sat grounded, rotors still, disgorging survivors and gear. We touched down hard, skids biting dirt, and the side door slid wide. Out, now, a soldier yelled, waving us toward a tent marked with a red cross. I helped the civvies down, the mom and her kid, the old woman, a guy cradling a busted arm. Medics rushed in, shouting over the rotor wash, triaging on the fly. I hung back, scanning the camp. Tents stretched across the field, packed with people, some bandaged, some sobbing, some just staring into nothing. Beyond the wire, infected prowled, kept at bay by bursts of machine gun fire. The guard had this locked down, for now, but it felt fragile, like a sandcastle waiting for the tide. A sergeant approached, clipboard in hand, face carved from stone. "Officer Adams?" I nodded. "Heard your unit got hit bad. You're the last from Lancaster PD?" "Far as I know," I said, voice rough. He scribbled something, then jerked a thumb toward a command tent. "Debrief in there. They'll want everything, timeline, contacts, what you saw." I trudged over, boots sinking in the mud. Inside, a major paced behind a folding table, maps and radios cluttering the space. She looked up, sharp-eyed, and waved me to a chair. "Talk," she said. So I did Jack's bite, the house on Oak Avenue, the station fight, Torres' last stand. My words came out flat, mechanical, like I was reading someone else's report. When I finished, she leaned back, rubbing her temples. "It's the same everywhere," she said, voice low. "Bites spread it. Fast. We're holding perimeters, but it's like bailing a sinking ship with a spoon. CDC's scrambling might be viral, might be something else. Doesn't matter if we can't contain it." She slid a canteen across the table. "Drink. You look like hell." I took it, the water cold against my cracked lips. "What's next?" I asked. She shrugged, grim. "We evac who we can, burn what we can't. Napalm's dropping in 20 on Lancaster. If you've got people there, they're gone." I thought of Torres' family, the coffee shop survivors, Daniels tearing into that kid. Gone already, one way or another. Outside, the camp buzzed with controlled panic, soldiers loading ammo, medics shouting, a priest giving last rites to a guy who'd stopped breathing. I stepped into the gray morning, the air thick with diesel and ash. A private handed me a rifle, standard issue, heavier than my Glock, and a vest. "You're with us now," he said. "Cop or not, we need bodies." I slung the rifle over my shoulder, the weight grounding me. My badge felt meaningless now, just a shiny trinket from a dead world. But that kid's question stuck with me. "You'll stop them." Maybe I couldn't. Maybe no one could. But I'd try. For Jack, for Torres, for the people we'd pulled out of that vault. The first napalm strike hit as I walked the perimeter, orange blooms erupting over Lancaster, the heat washing over us even miles away. The city I'd sworn to protect was ash now, a smoking scar on the earth. The infected screamed, faint and distant, as the flames took them. I wondered how many were still out there, beyond the fire, waiting. A soldier next to me, young, barely older than me, lit a cigarette, hands trembling. "Heard it's in New York now," he muttered. "DC too. Whole damn country's going dark." I didn't answer, just stared at the horizon. The radio chatter hadn't lied. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. My first night as a cop was over. I'd lost my mentor, my captain, my illusions, everything but the will to keep going. We'd saved a handful, a flicker of light in the dark. Maybe that was enough for now. But as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the camp, I knew the real fight was just starting. The nightmare wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to all of us.